In the heart of the city, a powerful female CEO walks toward her sleek black sedan ready for an important meeting. But a janitor suddenly rushes out, shouting for her not to get into the car under any circumstances. The CEO, furious at this interruption, orders her security to detain him. What she doesn't realize is that what he is about to reveal will expose a dark conspiracy hidden for years and save her brother from the very brink of death. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. Ma'am, do not under any circumstances enter that vehicle. The words, sharp and desperate, ripped through the otherwise placid afternoon air, raw with an urgency that seized Serafina Vance in the very act of reaching for the polished chrome handle of her luxury sedan. Her perception of the bustling metropolis momentarily fractured the ceaseless hum of the city, the distant mournful wail of sirens, the muted murmur of urban traffic, and even the subtle rustle of the wind through the concrete canyons seemed to recede, leaving only the reverberation of that ragged, utterly terrified voice. Two figures, her security detail, moved with the synchronized precision of well-trained predators. They converged instantaneously upon the source of the unexpected intrusion, a man clad in a faded gray janitor's uniform, his dark skin now pale and slick with a sheen of desperate perspiration. He had materialized from a discreet service exit, appearing with the abruptness of a specter emerging from the building's gleaming steel and glass facade. His eyes, wide and dilated, remained transfixed upon her, pleading with an intensity that bordered on the deranged. "Please stay well back, one of the guards." Marcus commanded his voice, a low, guttural growl that resonated with latent power. He positioned his formidable frame squarely between Serafina and the frantic janitor, his body forming an impregnable solid wall of protective muscle. The other guard, swift and merciless, seized the janitor, spinning him violently around and slamming his form against the cold, unyielding limestone wall of the towering Vanguard Dynamics skyscraper. A pained, guttural grunt escaped the man's lips as his breath was forcefully expelled from his lungs, a faint clatter of keys echoing on the pristine pavement below. "Do not permit her to enter that car." The janitor gasped, his neck craning, with an almost inhuman effort to maintain eye contact with Serafina. "I beg of you, she simply cannot." Serafina's initial shock rapidly congealed into a frigid, unyielding irritation. She was precisely 15 minutes behind schedule for a clandestine meeting that bore the strict injunction of absolute secrecy, and by its very nature could not possibly be rescheduled under any circumstances. This utterly unprecedented breach was to her executive mind an unacceptable dereliction of protocol. "Marcus, what is the precise meaning of this outrageous display?" she demanded, her voice possessing a sharp crystalline edge that could metaphorically slice through solid glass. She retracted her hand from the car door as if the very metal had been scorched by an unseen flame. "Who precisely is this disruptive individual? His name is Elijah Thorne, ma'am." Marcus stated, his keen eyes ceaselessly scanning the bustling street, the dizzying heights of the surrounding rooftops, and every single parked vehicle within his extensive field of vision. His hand, with practiced ease, drifted subtly towards the interior of his tailored jacket. "He is assigned to the night crew maintenance. He appears to be experiencing some sort of psychotic episode." The other guard grunted, wrenching Elijah's arms forcefully behind his back, securing them with practiced swiftness. No, Elijah's voice, raw with desperation, cracked audibly. "Listen to me, just for a singular moment, the car. It is not safe." The singular word safe hung suspended in the crisp air like an ominous pronouncement. In Serafina Vance's intricately structured world, safe was a term meticulously processed through a dozen intricate filters of corporate risk assessment and high-stakes industrial espionage. Yet, when shrieked by a frantic janitor on a mundane city sidewalk, it transcended its usual complexities, signifying only one stark, terrifying reality. Marcus's eyes, now narrowed to predatory slits, fixated first on the sleek black sedan, then darted back to Elijah's profoundly terrified countenance. Protocol, cold and unyielding, seized control of the situation. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle immediately." His tone was no longer a mere suggestion, it was an unequivocal command. He gestured imperiously to the other guard. "Lock it down. Summon the local authorities. Dispatch the bomb disposal unit. Establish a full perimeter." Serafina's jaw tightened, an almost imperceptible clench of profound frustration. "A bomb, Marcus. This is utterly preposterous. The man is patently unwell. Perhaps, ma'am, perhaps Marcus interjected, his tone gentle, yet unyielding, as he carefully guided her back towards the imposing marble entrance of the building. However, our remuneration does not permit us the luxury of gambling on perhaps. Within mere minutes, the once orderly street had dissolved into a swirling vortex of crimson and cerulean lights. Police cruisers, their tires shrieking in protest, sealed off both extremities of the block, forming an impenetrable barricade. A burgeoning throng of curious onlookers began to gather, their ubiquitous cellular phones held aloft like offerings to a new chaotic deity. Serafina stood just inside the cavernous lobby, her gaze fixed, watching the unfolding drama through the expansive plate glass. Her meticulously structured afternoon, now a heap of smoldering ruins. Her personal driver had been peremptorily ordered out of the vehicle and now stood a pale and shaken figure behind a hastily erected police line. Elijah Thorne was on his knees upon the cold, hard sidewalk, his hands secured behind his back by the unforgiving steel of handcuffs, two uniformed officers standing rigidly over him. He was no longer struggling. The raw physical fight had drained from him. He simply stared with a profound and unsettling intensity at the black sedan, which now sat in the desolate middle of the cordoned-off street, resembling nothing so much as a silent, opulent tomb. He had successfully halted her. In that singular, desperate act, everything else was secondary. But as the first member of the bomb squad, a formidable figure, clad in heavy protective gear, began to appear. A cold, insidious dread began to wash over him. He had not conceived of the scenario beyond that initial blinding imperative to prevent that car door from closing upon her. His thoughts, now unbidden, drifted to his cherished daughter, Aisha. He could visualize her with astonishing clarity, seated by the window of their modest apartment, her well-worn sketchbook open upon her small lap. He saw the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in her delicate hand as she attempted to draw a subtle, cruel symptom of the insidious disease that was systematically stealing her from him. Cell by agonizing cell. He remembered with painful clarity their most recent visit to the specialist, the hushed, pitying tone of the doctor's voice. The progression, Mr. Thorne, is demonstrably faster than we had originally anticipated. We are, I regret to inform you, rapidly exhausting our available options. That he knew with absolute certainty was a carefully constructed deception. There was an option, a nascent revolutionary one. They were referring to it in hushed, reverent tones as a miracle emanating from the elusive Orion Labs. He had seen the name indelibly imprinted upon the meticulously shredded papers he had painstakingly, agonizingly taped back together in the dim, clandestine light of his custodial closet, his hands trembling violently with a mixture of fear and burgeoning hope. He had discerned the name of the clinical trial, the distinguished name of the lead researcher, and with a chilling jolt that froze his very blood, the name of the primary test subject. A low metallic groan, deep and resonant, abruptly tore him back to the harsh present. A bomb disposal robot, its articulated segments whirring softly, was inexorably rolling towards the sedan. It extended a mechanical arm, its camera eyes swiveling with dispassionate precision to examine the vehicle's undercarriage. Serafina watched her arms tightly crossed over her chest, a knot of simmering fury constricting within the pit of her stomach. The crucial meeting, now irrevocably missed, was to have occurred at a private airfield. The flight, now impossible, was scheduled for less than an hour from this moment. She was meant to be present to bear witness to the culmination of 2 arduous years of intensely secret off-the-books funding. It was to be the very moment she would at long last see her beloved brother again. She glanced pointedly towards the janitor. His head was bowed in a posture of profound resignation, his shoulders slumped in utter defeat. He did not in this moment resemble the archetype of a terrorist. He looked rather like a man slowly and irrevocably drowning. An hour later, the definitive verdict arrived. The vehicle was unequivocally clean. Every single panel, every intricate wire, every minute inch of the chassis had been meticulously swept. There was no bomb. There was no discernible threat. There was, in fact, nothing at all. The police tape, a symbol of the morning's chaos, was systematically taken down. The curious crowds, their momentary diversion concluded, dispersed. The bomb disposal unit methodically packed up their specialized gear. The only lingering elements were the fading echo of sirens and Serafina Vance's cold, undiluted, and absolutely incandescent rage. The two officers with brusque efficiency pulled Elijah to his feet. "You're looking at a serious felony charge, friend," one of them stated, his voice devoid of sympathy. "Making a false report, inciting widespread panic. The district attorney is going to have an absolute field day with you." They were preparing to escort him to a waiting cruiser when Serafina, her figure imbued with renewed purpose, stepped out of the lobby. Her designer heels clicked on the pavement with the sharp, deliberate rhythm of a ticking clock, each step a pronouncement of her unwavering resolve. Marcus moved swiftly to her side, his presence a silent sentinel. "Ma'am, we will handle this matter." "No." She articulated, her voice dangerously quiet, a tremor of latent power beneath its soft cadence. She stopped directly in front of Elijah, her gaze so incredibly intense it felt to him like a tangible physical weight pressing upon his very being. The officers paused their movements, arrested, awaiting her next command. She regarded this man, this nobody, this spectral figure from the night shift who had just irrevocably cost her something of immeasurable importance. She did not perceive a madman. She perceived instead a terror that was far too specific, far too viscerally real, and she needed with an almost desperate urgency to comprehend why. She dismissed the officers with a subtle, almost imperceptible flick of her piercing eyes. They stepped back, but remained in close proximity, their readiness palpable. "You have precisely 5 seconds," Serafina uttered, her voice barely a whisper, yet carrying the full, unyielding force of her formidable power. "You will illuminate for me the precise reasons why you have just utterly annihilated my entire day. And if I do not find your explanation entirely credible, I will personally ensure that I systematically annihilate the remainder of your life." Elijah's heart hammered furiously against his ribs, each powerful beat a frantic drum signaling impending panic. Her eyes, the unyielding color of a gathering winter storm, bored into him with an intensity that threatened to consume him. This was it. This was the pivotal moment where his life would either irrevocably conclude or pivot onto a path so utterly unforeseen he could not begin to envision the road ahead. He could not, in this precarious moment, divulge every single detail. The meticulously reassembled shredded papers, the clandestine late-night research, the intricate suffocating web of lies he had barely begun to untangle. To vocalize all of it would undoubtedly sound like the incoherent ravings of a madman. He required one singular thing, one crucial key to unlock the iron-forged door of her formidable fury and definitively prove that this desperate act was anything but random. His throat felt like desiccated sandpaper. He swallowed the sound disproportionately loud in the sudden profound silence that enveloped them. Cognitive atrophy syndrome. He breathed the words clumsy and foreign, even in his own mouth, as if they were a secret incantation. For the very first time since their gazes had locked in this tense confrontation, Serafina Vance flinched. It was a reaction imperceptible to anyone else present, a slight, almost infinitesimal widening of her eyes, a fractional, involuntary tightening of her perfectly sculpted lips. But to Elijah, who had wagered his entire world upon this solitary, fragile moment, it was akin to a vast canyon suddenly cleaving open at his very feet. He had, with startling precision, hit the target. Her composure, a formidable fortress meticulously constructed over the span of a lifetime, resealed itself in an instant, a seamless reassertion of her impenetrable facade. Yet the minuscule crack for a fleeting moment had been undeniable. She knew. She comprehended with chilling clarity precisely what he was referencing. That clinical, profoundly obscure name was a secret she had meticulously interred beneath countless layers of corporate firewalls, stringent non-disclosure agreements, and a crushing weight of deeply personal pain. To hear it articulated by a mere janitor on a bustling city street was akin to having a spectral whisper brush against her ear. She pivoted her movements sharp and decisive to face the police officers, her tone subtly shifting, reverting to its accustomed register of absolute command. "This is now a matter of corporate security, gentlemen, an entirely internal one. I will personally oversee Mr. Thorne's debriefing. You are to release him immediately into the custody of my security chief." The officer, momentarily discomfited, frowned slightly. "Ma'am, he unequivocally committed a criminal offense. We cannot simply—" "You can, and you most certainly will." Serafina interjected her voice, leaving no conceivable room for protest or argument. "Vanguard Dynamics will not be pressing any charges whatsoever. We will, however, be providing the city with a remarkably generous donation to the Police Benevolent Fund as a token of compensation for the extensive resources expended this afternoon. Ensure the necessary paperwork is directed to my legal department. It was not in any sense of the word a request. It was a non-negotiable transaction. The officer exchanged a swift, knowing glance with his partner, then with a defeated sigh, nodded his assent. The handcuffs, a symbol of Elijah's recent predicament, were unlocked. Elijah massaged his wrists, the raw crimson mark serving as a stark, undeniable testament to how perilously close he had come to the precipice of utter ruin. Marcus Serafina commanded, her voice calm and authoritative, without even deigning to look at him. Escort Mr. Thorne to the 60th floor conference room. He is expressly forbidden from conversing with anyone. He is expressly forbidden from leaving. Await my arrival with him. Yes, ma'am. Marcus's hand settled lightly, yet with an undeniable firmness upon Elijah's elbow. The touch was not overtly rough, but it was without question inescapable. As Marcus began to lead him back into the gleaming, expansive lobby of the towering skyscraper, Elijah felt the insidious tendrils of a new, more profound variety of fear begin to coil within him. He was no longer merely a citizen ensnared within the cold embrace of the law. He was instead an asset, a perplexing problem, a crucial piece of corporate intelligence, now held firmly within the iron grip of Serafina Vance. He could not, in that moment, discern which predicament was the more terrifying. The 60th floor conference room was in essence a glass-encased box, suspended high in the vast sky. Expansive windows on 3 of its 4 sides offered a breathtaking, almost omniscient view of the sprawling cityscape below, a vast, intricate map composed of glittering lights and shifting shadows. The conference table itself was a singular, colossal slab of obsidian black marble, polished to such a dazzling, mirror-like finish that it reflected the distant clouds. Elijah felt acutely like a minute insect impaled beneath the merciless lens of a microscope. Marcus stood rigidly by the door, silent and motionless, a stoic statue. An hour crawled by, then another. Elijah's mind raced with a frantic, desperate intensity. He thought of Aisha alone in their small apartment, likely engrossed in animated cartoons, blissfully unaware of the terrifying hurricane her father had, with a single desperate act, inadvertently walked into. He had to contact her. He had to inform her that he would regrettably be late. He looked at Marcus, hope flickering briefly in his exhausted eyes. May I utilize my phone?" he inquired, his voice barely a whisper. "My daughter, no." Marcus responded flatly, his expression unyielding. The door finally opened with a soft, almost imperceptible click. Serafina Vance swept into the room, her personal assistant trailing silently behind her, a sleek tablet clutched firmly in their hand. She dismissed the assistant with a mere nod. The door clicked shut, sealing the 3 of them within the sterile, echoing silence of the room. She did not sit. Instead, she began to prowl the perimeter of the vast room, her heels moving soundlessly upon the plush, expensive carpet. Elijah remained standing, acutely aware of the ingrained grime on his utility uniform, the persistent sheen of sweat on his brow, and the vast, unbridgeable chasm that separated their 2 vastly disparate worlds. Cognitive atrophy syndrome. She began, her voice calm, utterly controlled, devoid of any discernible emotion. It is an exceptionally rare neurological affliction. Fewer than 3,000 diagnosed cases have been recorded worldwide. She paused, her gaze now fixed upon him with unnerving intensity. "Tell me, Mr. Thorne, how a man whose primary occupation involves mopping floors for a living became an undisputed expert in the rarefied field of boutique neurology." Elijah's hands, despite his best efforts, trembled perceptibly. He clasped them tightly behind his back in an attempt to hide their involuntary tremor. "My daughter Aisha," he began, his voice surprisingly steady, despite the profound internal turmoil. "She was diagnosed 6 months ago." The words, stark and heavy, landed in the silent room and remained suspended there, imbued with a palpable weight. Serafina ceased her pacing and pivoted to face him fully, her expression unreadable. He could, however, discern the subtle conflict within her piercing eyes, the formidable CEO meticulously assessing a potential threat, and the woman hearing an echo of her own private, agonizing hell. "She's 7. Elijah continued, his voice thickening with a profound emotion he could no longer, despite his desperate efforts, suppress. She adores drawing, but her hands have begun to tremble. The specialist indicated it is actively progressing. They asserted there is absolutely nothing they can possibly do. He observed a fleeting flicker of something in her otherwise impassive expression. It was not pity, not precisely. It was rather a shared bleak understanding. He knew with a certainty that resonated deep within his bones that he had to press on. I possess knowledge of the trial, he stated, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The one you are clandestinely funding, the so-called Vanguard Initiative. I am aware that you believe you have discovered a definitive cure. Serafina's face became utterly blank, her expression now entirely unreadable, like a closed book. The precise source of your information, Mr. Thorne, is of considerable interest to me. I discovered things. Papers. He could not yet confess the humiliating truth that he had meticulously pieced them together from a shredder bin. I discern the name of the lead subject in the final phase. Your brother, Caleb Vance. Her jaw tightened, an almost imperceptible clench of profound realization. You have been exceedingly diligent, Mr. Thorne. I was desperate. He shot back, a sudden surge of raw courage rising within him, momentarily eclipsing his pervasive fear. Wouldn't you be a potential cure is being surreptitiously developed within the very edifice I work in, a cure for the very affliction that is systematically stealing the life from my precious little girl. I was compelled to ascertain more, and what you have ascertained prompted you to instigate a citywide panic, and by extension cause me to irrevocably miss the most monumentally important meeting of my life. Yes. Liam took a determined step forward. Marcus by the door tensed his body, coiling, ready to act. Because it is not a cure, it is a profound fabrication. The treatment, it simply does not function. It exacerbates the condition. I observed the preliminary data, the horrifying mortality rates they meticulously interred within the obscure appendices. They are not Miss Vance engaged in the noble act of saving your brother. They are instead callously exploiting him. Serafina stared at him, her formidable mind racing ceaselessly, processing, meticulously analyzing. Was this perhaps an elaborately orchestrated corporate sabotage attempt? Was he merely a pawn, a disposable tool wielded by a ruthless rival company? Or was he something far more dangerous, far more profoundly unsettling? A desperate father who had, by sheer improbable chance, stumbled upon a devastating truth she herself had resolutely refused to perceive. She had poured meticulously a staggering $1 billion of her personal fortune into this singular, audacious project. She had implicitly trusted Dr. Silas Thorne. She had, with a desperate fervor, believed in the promise of a miracle, because in the depths of her being, she had to. She walked to the head of the colossal table and at long last took a seat, gesturing imperiously for him to occupy the chair directly opposite her. The profound distance between them felt to Elijah like an insurmountable chasm of miles. You purport to have a daughter. She stated, her tone subtly shifting, becoming less that of a cold interrogator and more that of a calculating strategist. I am going to require her complete medical records, her full diagnostic history, absolutely everything pertaining to her condition. Elijah's blood ran cold in his veins. Why? She has absolutely no connection to any of this. She has everything to do with this. Serafina corrected him, her eyes locking onto his with an unnerving intensity. You have put forth an extraordinary claim, Mr. Thorne, a demonstrably dangerous one. I need to ascertain if the very foundation of your profound narrative is meticulously constructed upon unyielding bedrock or upon shifting, deceptive sand. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, intensely murmuring tone that was barely audible. You are not, I assure you, departing from this building. My people will be meticulously scrutinizing every conceivable aspect of your life, commencing, I might add, with your daughter. If you are in fact speaking the unvarnished truth, then we possess a powerful mutual interest. But if you are instead fabricating a deception, she paused, allowing the immense weight of her words to fully permeate the silent room, then you have Mr. Thorne unwittingly forged an enemy you cannot possibly begin to comprehend. The profound silence within the glass-encased cage was absolute, suffocating. Elijah sat at the obsidian table, his reflection a tired, profoundly distorted stranger staring back at him from the gleaming surface. He was, in essence, a prisoner, not confined within a jail cell adorned with visible bars, but rather within a sky-high monument to a world to which he utterly did not belong. His very fate hung precariously on the unpredictable whims of a woman who possessed the power to utterly erase him with a singular phone call. Every relentless minute that ticked by was a minute he was not agonizingly with Aisha. Was she home from her school yet? Had Mrs. Henderson, their next-door neighbor, provided her with the afternoon snack he had meticulously prepared? Had she noticed that he had uncharacteristically failed to call? The very thought was a physical pain, sharper and more acute than the persistent ache in his wrists. In her penthouse office, precisely 5 floors above Serafina, Vance moved with a cold, resolute purpose. The janitor's desperate, ragged confession had inexplicably bypassed her meticulously constructed corporate defenses and had instead struck something far deeper within her, something she had deliberately forbidden herself from feeling in countless years: doubt. "I want every single detail pertaining to Elijah Thorne," she commanded Marcus over the intercom, her voice utterly devoid of discernible emotion. "His comprehensive employment history, his credit score, his social media presence, his known associates. I want to know unequivocally what he consumes for breakfast, and I require his daughter's complete medical file, not a mere summary, but the entire unadulterated chart. Have our formidable legal team direct the request immediately to the Pediatric Neurology Department at St. Jude's. Utilize my name. I require it within 1 hour." And Mr. Thorne Marcus's voice crackled back through the intercom, a low query. "He remains precisely where he is. No calls, no contact. He is to be considered a black box. I need to ascertain precisely what lies within before I make the decision to open it." The gargantuan machinery of Vanguard Dynamics, once methodically aimed at Elijah, now refocused its formidable intelligence upon the entirety of his life story. It operated with brutal, dispassionate efficiency. Within a mere 45 minutes, a series of intricately encrypted files materialized upon Serafina's tablet. She seamlessly bypassed the extensive financial data and proceeded directly to the medical report. Patient, Aisha Thorne, age 7. Diagnosis, cognitive atrophy syndrome, stage 2. Serafina's breath caught in her throat, a sharp, involuntary gasp. She meticulously read through the attending neurologist's detailed notes. The clinical language, stark and sterile, offered a chilling, almost detached description of a nightmare she knew with horrifying intimacy all too well. Patient presence with increased distal tremors, observable decline in fine motor skills. Prognosis remains aggressive. It was chillingly a precise mirror of the weekly reports she received concerning her own brother Caleb. The very foundation of Elijah Thorne's astonishing story was not, as she had fleetingly feared, built upon shifting sand. It was instead built upon unyielding bedrock. He was not in any sense of the word lying. The profound knowledge, rather than bringing relief, merely ushered in a colder, more pervasive sense of dread. If he was unequivocally speaking the truth about the grave condition of his daughter, what if he was also, with chilling accuracy, speaking the truth about the so-called cure? Down on the 60th floor, Elijah was pacing a trapped animal. The anxiety was a living, breathing entity within him, relentlessly clawing at his insides. He had to speak to Aisha. He approached the formidable door where Marcus stood, an immovable, impassive object. "Please, Elijah," pleaded his voice, cracking raw with desperation. "I simply must call my daughter. She will be terribly worried. She is just a little girl. Just 2 minutes. You can listen to every single word." Marcus's expression remained utterly unreadable, but he subtly tapped his earpiece. "Ma'am, Thorne is requesting to make a call to his daughter." The line remained silent for a tense moment. Then Serafina's voice emerged, clipped and precise. "Put it on speaker." Marcus produced a cellular phone and meticulously dialed the number Elijah had provided him. After precisely 2 rings, Aisha's small, sweet voice answered. "Daddy," a wave of profound relief, so powerful it made Elijah's head spin with momentary dizziness, washed over him a soothing balm. "Hey, sweet pea, it's me. Daddy, where precisely are you? You neglected to call after school." He closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against the cool, unyielding glass of the window. The lie, now poised on his tongue, felt like corrosive acid. "I know, baby. I am so terribly sorry. It's been an utterly chaotic night at work. One of the principal water pipes experienced a significant rupture, and it's created an immense, unholy mess. I am compelled to work a double shift to assist in the arduous cleanup." "Uh-oh," she responded, her voice small, a fragile whisper. "Will you be home for bedtime stories?" The simple, innocent question was a literal knife plunged into his aching heart. "I am going to try, Aisha. I am going to try with every fiber of my being, truly, truly hard." "Did you partake of your snack?" "Yes, and I diligently completed my homework. I even sketched a picture of a grand castle specifically for you. It possesses a very large gate designed to keep all the nefarious monsters out." Elijah choked back a nascent sob, skillfully transforming it into a cough. "That sounds absolutely magnificent, Sweet Pea. You ensure that gate remains strong for your daddy, all right. All right, Daddy. I love you. I love you more, Aisha. Be a good girl for Mrs. Henderson. I will contact you precisely as soon as I possibly can." He disconnected the call, his hand trembling uncontrollably. He slowly slid down the wall to the opulent floor, burying his face in his trembling hands, the meticulously constructed facade of strength crumbling, disintegrating into dust. He remained utterly unaware of the CEO, precisely 5 floors above, who had meticulously listened to every single word of the raw, emotional exchange. The sterile, impersonal silence of her office was now profoundly permeated by the unmistakable sound of a father's breaking heart. Serafina switched off the intercom a decisive click. The brief, raw conversation had achieved what no financial report or meticulously detailed background check could ever hope to accomplish. It had unequivocally made Elijah Thorne real. He was not merely a corporate threat. He was a man engaged in fighting the very same agonizing war she was, only he possessed none of her vast, overwhelming resources. She turned to her secure terminal and with a few swift keystrokes pulled up the file pertaining to the Vanguard initiative. She scrolled past the glossy, deceptively optimistic progress reports meticulously authored by Dr. Silas Thorne, past the fabricated projections of inevitable success. Her eyes meticulously scanned the financials, the seemingly endless lists of acquisitions for the sprawling research facility, exotic chemicals, state-of-the-art lab equipment, specialized containment units, and a name she had with a casual indifference approved mere months ago but had never once truly questioned. A substantial consulting payment directed to a clandestine firm known as Spectre Solutions. A swift, encrypted search promptly brought up the company's extensive file. It was unequivocally a shell corporation, and its sole proprietor was a doctor named Gideon Crow, a disgraced biochemist who had irrevocably lost his medical license precisely 5 years earlier for the egregious act of falsifying clinical trial data, a damning fact Dr. Thorne had conveniently neglected to mention. Her blood now ran cold. She had been so utterly blinded by the desperate fervent hope, so profoundly desperate for a genuine miracle, that she had inexcusably ignored the glaring red flags, the minuscule yet pervasive inconsistencies. Dr. Thorne's vehement resistance to a third-party audit, which he had dismissively characterized as unnecessary delays that Caleb simply cannot afford. She looked at a faded photograph on her meticulously organized desk, a younger version of herself and her beloved brother, their faces illuminated by joyful smiles sailing upon a sun-dappled ocean, the wind playfully tousling their hair before the devastating diagnosis, before their world had tragically shrunk to antiseptic hospital rooms and grim, unyielding prognoses. The janitor had with unsettling accuracy been absolutely correct. They were not in fact engaged in the noble act of saving him. They were instead callously exploiting him. Her finger hovered imperceptibly over the intercom button poised to summon Marcus. No, this particular situation required a vastly different approach, a more delicate touch. She lifted her direct encrypted line, connecting instantly to Dr. Silas Thorne's private office at the clandestine research facility. He answered on the very first ring, his voice smooth as polished silk, imbued with a false joviality. "Serafina, I was beginning to experience a modicum of concern. I trust the meeting was..." "It was postponed." She articulated, her voice a chip of unyielding ice, utterly devoid of any warmth. She did not afford him the luxury of a response. "Silas, I am currently reviewing the third quarter expenditure reports. A payment was prominently flagged for a consultant Spectre Solutions. I was entirely unaware that we had engaged an outside firm to meticulously analyze our data." "Can you therefore clarify Dr. Gideon Crow's precise role in this trial?" The profound silence on the opposite end of the line was to Serafina utterly deafening. It endured for a mere 3 seconds, yet within that interminable span, Serafina heard everything. The frantic, desperate search for a plausible lie, the profound shock of being caught in the act, the cold, sharp clang of a trap springing shut with terrifying finality. Finally, Dr. Thorne's voice returned strained and abruptly stripped of its customary easy charm. Gideon Crow. That must be some sort of egregious clerical error. He possesses no formal role whatsoever. He is merely an old colleague whom I occasionally consult for his historical perspective. His historical perspective on the egregious act of falsifying data, Serafina inquired, allowing the question to hang suspended in the frigid air, cold and lethally precise. Doctor. Thorne sputtered on the other end of the line, a torrent of indignant protests tumbling forth from his lips. Falsifying data, that man was an innocent victim of malicious academic politics. I will absolutely not have my professional integrity questioned, Serafina. Not after everything I have selflessly done for your esteemed family. Your professional integrity, Silas, is no longer a pertinent topic of discussion, Serafina stated, her voice dropping to absolute zero, a chilling pronouncement. It is now irrefutable evidence. You will not under any circumstances touch the facility servers. You will not delete a single solitary file. And if you dare to go anywhere near my brother, I will personally unleash the full, unyielding weight of the federal government upon you so swiftly, your head will spin like a top. Am I unequivocally clear? She did not wait for an answer. She terminated the call, the profound silence in her opulent office now ringing with the chilling finality of a death sentence. The board was meticulously set. The insidious enemy had been definitively flushed from the concealing shadows. Now she was compelled to move with a speed that surpassed his. She took her private elevator, descending swiftly to the 60th floor. When she entered the glass-walled conference room, Elijah was on his feet, pacing like a frenzied caged animal. He looked up as she entered, his face a mask of profound exhaustion and gnawing fear. The intricate power dynamic between them had irrevocably shifted. He was no longer merely a suspect, and she was no longer simply his accuser. They were now two individuals standing on opposite sides of a vast canyon, yet now staring with a shared chilling realization at the same monstrous entity lurking on the other side. You were correct. She confessed, the words costing her a minuscule yet significant piece of her formidable pride. She slid her sleek tablet across the polished marble table. On the illuminated screen was the meticulously detailed file for Spectre Solutions and the damning, undeniable photograph of Dr. Gideon Crow. Dr. Thorne has been clandestinely remunerating a disgraced researcher who was explicitly barred for the egregious act of faking trial results. He in fact panicked when I confronted him just moments ago. He lied. Elijah stared at the screen, then his gaze shifted back to her, a profound mixture of terror and dawning understanding in his eyes. The validation, rather than providing immediate solace, did little to alleviate the pervasive terror reflected in his eyes. It merely served to confirm the terrifying depth of the danger they were now both irrevocably immersed in. He is going to move. Elijah stated, his voice barely a whisper, a chilling premonition. He is going to accelerate his timeline. Yes. Serafina affirmed, her own voice tight-strained with the gravity of the realization. The meeting you inadvertently compelled me to miss today. It was precisely intended to bear witness to the final, supposedly conclusive results, and to authorize the ultimate transfer of funds. Once that substantial sum of money is securely within his account, he and his damning data will be irrevocably gone. And my brother. She could not in that moment bring herself to complete the chilling sentence. Elijah's mind raced, recalling the meticulously shredded documents, the tantalizing fragments of sentences he had so painstakingly pieced together. A particular phrase, one he had not fully comprehended at the time, now clicked into place with terrifying clarity. Post-transfer asset liquidation. They were not, he realized with a sickening jolt, discussing stocks or bonds. They were discussing her brother. He is going to murder him. Elijah stated, the profound realization striking him with the force of a physical blow, to enter the irrefutable proof that the cure was nothing more than a profound fraud. Serafina nodded, her jaw tight, an almost imperceptible clench of grim determination. Which means we have at most an hour, maybe even less. I need to know everything you witnessed, every single word, every name. Do not, under any circumstances, omit anything, no matter how ostensibly insignificant. For the very first time, Elijah felt a powerful surge of nascent agency. He was no longer utterly powerless. He was, in this critical moment, the only other individual who possessed a crucial piece of the terrifying truth. First, you must promise me something. Serafina raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, a silent, imperious question. My daughter Elijah stated, his voice firm, utterly unwavering, imbued with a newfound resolve. If I assist you, if we embark upon this perilous endeavor, you must promise me that you will protect her, no matter what dire consequences may ensue. Serafina meticulously studied his resolute face, discerning within it the unshakable resolve of a devoted father, a profound determination she was only just beginning to comprehend within herself. Your daughter's safety, Mr. Thorne, is absolutely non-negotiable, she stated, her tone softening perceptibly for the very first time, losing its customary executive sharpness. If we succeed in exposing this horrific travesty, I will personally fund her comprehensive treatment with a legitimate world-class medical team, regardless of where in the world we are compelled to travel. You have my solemn word, as a woman, not as a CEO. It was to Elijah an unbreakable vow, and it was unequivocally enough. Elijah meticulously recounted every single detail he could possibly remember: the arcane offshore bank account numbers, the complex chemical formulas that conspicuously failed to match any known public patents, and most crucially, the specific name of a transport company scheduled for a medical waste disposal pickup from the facility's inconspicuous back dock at precisely 6:00 a.m. the subsequent morning. It's not waste. Serafina murmured, her face now pale with a dawning horror. It's Caleb. She sprang into action, her formidable mind a whirlwind of intricate strategy. Marcus, she barked into her intercom, her voice crisp with command. Prepare the private jet for Meridian Airfield immediately. And I require full schematics for the Orion Research Facility architectural security and HVAC now. She turned back to Elijah, her gaze intensely focused. I can arrange for a team of federal marshals to arrive there, but it will necessitate a judge. Warrants. It could realistically take up to 12 hours. We do not possess 12 hours. Thorne will be long gone by then. We are compelled to infiltrate tonight. They will be meticulously monitoring the main entrance. Elijah stated, his mind already meticulously piecing together the fragmented information. The gates, the surveillance cameras. They will anticipate a frontal assault. Marcus entered the room, carrying a sleek tablet which now projected the facility's intricate blueprints onto a massive screen that silently descended from the ceiling. It was undeniably a formidable fortress, a singular heavily guarded access road, electrified perimeter fencing motion sensors strategically placed. A full tactical assault under these circumstances would be nothing short of a prolonged siege. Ma'am, Marcus stated gravely, his voice conveying the immense challenge. It is unequivocally impossible on this truncated timeline. Elijah stepped closer to the screen, his sharp eyes scanning not the main structures, but rather the inconspicuous spaces in between. His finger, with an intuitive precision, landed upon a small, seemingly insignificant icon situated on the far side of the sprawling compound. What, pray tell, is that? Serafina inquired. An industrial sanitation conduit, Elijah answered, his voice gaining a newfound quiet confidence. Designed for the controlled disposal of acidic chemical runoff from the main laboratory. It is heavily shielded, meticulously reinforced, and it empties into a drainage culvert approximately half a mile beyond the perimeter fence. Marcus frowned, his brow furrowed in concentration. That particular conduit would be less than 30 inches in width, and it would be directly connected to their active waste processing system. It's a suicide run. Not if their waste processing system isn't actively engaged. Elijah countered, a spark of cunning in his eyes. The documents I managed to piece together contained a maintenance schedule. The primary filtration system is meticulously shut down for cleaning every night. Between 2 and 4 a.m., they would not logically be conducting experiments during that period. To conserve power, they would undoubtedly put the laboratory into standby mode. Serafina stared at him, a fleeting flicker of awe in her piercing eyes. He perceived the building not as an impregnable fortress, but as an intricate network of exploitable vulnerabilities. He saw it precisely the way a janitor intimately familiar with its hidden pathways would. You are suggesting that we could gain entry through a sewer pipe. She articulated, her voice laced with a mixture of disbelief and nascent hope. I am suggesting, Miss Vance, Elijah corrected her gently, his tone resonating with quiet conviction that he will be meticulously watching the front door for a high-powered CEO. He will never in his wildest estimations be watching the drains for a humble janitor. A heavy, profound silence permeated the room. The audacious plan was without question insane. It was recklessly audacious. but it was unequivocally the only slim chance they possessed. Serafina looked from the intricate schematic to Elijah's determined yet weary face, then to Marcus. "Acquire the necessary gear," she commanded, her voice firm and resolute. "We are proceeding with infiltration, and Mr. Thorne is accompanying us." The private jet ascended silently into the vast inky canvas of the night, a spectral ghost, leaving the city's glittering intricate grid far behind. Elijah sat stiffly in a cream-colored leather seat, its luxurious softness costing more than his entire car. His janitor's uniform felt like a bizarre, ill-fitting costume in this rarefied world of polished wood and silent, effortless efficiency. Across from him, Serafina Vance had shed her formidable CEO persona and was now transformed into a field commander, her intelligent face illuminated by the cold azure light emanating from the intricate schematics displayed on her tablet. Marcus sat stoically beside her, meticulously checking a set of compact high-tech gear with practiced ease. The silence on the plane was heavy, profoundly saturated with the unspoken fear and desperate hope that clung to their perilous mission. Elijah's ordinary world had been utterly upended in less than 12 hours. He clutched the armrests, his knuckles white, and thought of Aisha. He pictured with vivid clarity her drawing of the Grand Castle, its formidable gate meticulously designed to keep all monsters out. Tonight he was with a chilling certainty walking through that very gate to confront them head-on. Serafina looked up, her gaze analytical yet no longer hostile, the sharp edges of her executive demeanor softened by the gravity of their shared endeavor. "Tell me about her," she said, her voice quiet, almost ethereal, cutting effortlessly through the pervasive hum of the jet's engines. Elijah blinked, momentarily disoriented. "Who Aisha?" Serafina clarified, her voice imbued with a newfound gentle persistence. "You are risking your very life for her. I desire to comprehend precisely why." He swallowed the lump in his throat, feeling like a heavy, unyielding stone. She's immensely bright." He began, his voice rough with suppressed emotion, yet resonating with deep affection. "She's delightfully funny. She poses a million incessant questions. Her preferred color is yellow, the vivid hue of the sun precisely when it first awakens. She harbors the profound ambition to become an astronomer. She states with unwavering conviction that she desires to discover a new, uncharted star and name it after her beloved mother." He trailed off the poignant memory of his late wife, a sudden sharp and intensely personal ache in his heart. Serafina offered no empty platitudes of pity. She simply listened, her gaze unwavering, absorbing every raw, unspoken nuance. "My brother Caleb," she finally spoke, her voice dropping to a register so profoundly low Elijah had to strain every fiber of his being to discern her words. "He used to sail. He harbored an immense, almost spiritual love for the boundless ocean. He would often articulate that it was the only place where one could truly feel the immense scale of the world, and conversely, the profound insignificance of one's own problems. The last time we conversed, he confided in me that he simply yearned to feel the warmth of the sun upon his face just one more time, without simultaneously feeling as though he was slowly, inexorably fading away. In that singular, ephemeral moment, they transcended their disparate roles as CEO and janitor. They were simply two individuals irrevocably bound by the same cruel, insidious disease, sharing the poignant narratives of the beloved people they were desperately striving to save. An hour later, the luxurious comfort of the jet was but a distant memory supplanted by the pervasive damp chill of a dense forest floor. They moved with the silent, disciplined precision of a tactical unit. The only discernible sound was the muted crunch of their boots upon the carpet of fallen leaves. Then, with a chilling clarity, they perceived it. A formidable, towering chain-link fence, its upper perimeter bristling with glinting razor wire, and beyond it emerging like a low, dark, ominous shape against the vast, starry expanse of the night sky, the Orion Research Facility. Elijah led them along the irregular perimeter to the precise spot indicated on the schematic. The drainage culvert was a concrete tube, its entrance half hidden by a tangle of overgrown weeds, the surrounding air thick with a cloying chemical tang. Marcus produced a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters, and with a series of sharp, decisive snips, severed the rusted iron grate. "It's 2:15 a.m., he whispered into the comms, his voice low and urgent, as he distributed night vision goggles to them both. "The primary filtration system should remain offline for another hour and 45 minutes. If we are not extracted by then, this pipe will, without question, become inundated with corrosive chemicals. Our objective is singular. We infiltrate, we locate the brother, and we extract ourselves. No deviations whatsoever. The crawl through the conduit was a claustrophobic nightmare, an agonizing ordeal. Elijah followed Marcus into the pipe, the enclosed space shockingly tight, pressing in on all sides. They moved on hands and knees through a slick, cold, and foul-smelling residue, the world reduced to the eerie, monochromatic green glow of their goggles and the ragged echoing sound of their own labored breaths. The pipe acted as a perfect amplifier, transforming every minute scrape of a knee and every desperate gasp for air into a deafening, oppressive noise. It felt with an unsettling realism, like being buried alive, a slow, miserable journey through the foul internal intestines of the immense building. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of agonizing progress, Marcus abruptly stopped. "We're here," he breathed into the comms, his voice tinged with a mixture of relief and anticipation. Ahead, a formidable vertical steel grill blocked their onward path. Beyond it, Elijah could faintly discern the intricate shapes of pipes and heavy machinery in a cavernous, subterranean chamber. They had, against formidable odds, made it inside. A potent surge of adrenaline coursed through him. Marcus meticulously readied a small, high-powered hydraulic tool, preparing to pry the obstinate grill open. But then he paused, holding up a warning hand for absolute silence. He peered intently through the bars, his entire body going rigid with an unsettling stillness. He slowly, deliberately lowered the tool. "What is it?" Serafina whispered into her comm unit, her voice laced with growing apprehension. "What precisely is amiss?" Marcus slowly backed away from the grill, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He looked back at them, his eyes wide-dilated within the eerie green glow of the goggles. "We have a significant problem." He breathed, his voice tight with an undeniable alarm. "The lab is not on standby. There are unequivocally 2 men down here, and they are armed." The whisper, sharp as a shard of broken glass, echoed chillingly in the tight metallic space. "Armed." Elijah's blood turned instantly to ice in his veins. This alarming development was utterly not a part of their meticulously crafted plan. The entire perilous mission had been predicated on the assumption of a sleeping building staffed by a minimal skeleton crew. Instead, they had, with chilling irony, crawled directly into a veritable hornet's nest. Through the grill, he could now clearly perceive them. 2 men not clad in standard security uniforms, but rather in dark, functional tactical gear. They wore heavy, specialized boots that made no discernible sound on the cold concrete floor and carried compact submachine guns with the practiced ease of seasoned professionals. They were not, he realized with a sickening jolt, mere guards. They were unequivocally soldiers. And they moved with a predatory stillness, their eyes meticulously scanning the deep shadows as they systematically loaded large sealed biohazard containers onto a heavy-duty pallet situated near a waiting freight elevator. "They're not patrolling," Marcus breathed back, his voice grim. "They're staging, loading out." Elijah's eyes locked onto the pristine white containers, and his heart seized with a chilling realization. He remembered with horrifying clarity the ominous line item from the meticulously shredded documents, Transport and Disposal Contract, Bio-Waste Class 7. The pickup was not in fact scheduled for 6:00 a.m. It was instead happening now. "That's it," Elijah whispered, his voice tight with dawning horror. "That's the transport." Thorne moved up the timeline. As soon as you placed that call, he initiated the protocol. "Asset liquidation." Serafina hissed the corporate euphemism, now tasting like bitter ash in her mouth, its true, horrifying meaning laid bare. They were no longer attempting to break in to discover proof. They were instead desperately attempting to halt a murder already in chilling progress. The ticking clock was no longer the 4:00 a.m. sanitation flush. It was now the ominous closing doors of that freight elevator. "We cannot possibly get through here." Marcus stated, the chilling finality in his tone echoing ominously. "They possess a clear line of sight. We would be cut down before we could even take 2 steps. Panic, cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, pricked at Elijah's mind, threatening to overwhelm him. They were irrevocably trapped. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing himself to visualize the intricate blueprints he had meticulously studied for countless hours, every minute detail etched into his memory. He was not a soldier. He was a humble janitor. He saw what they, in their military mindset, did not. The shaft he breathed his voice, urgent, a sudden spark of inspiration igniting within his mind. The lab supply dumbwaiter. On the schematics, it was 20 yards to the immediate left of our current position on the north wall. It's across open floor. Marcus countered his voice flat with skepticism. Created diversion, Serafina commanded her formidable mind, already rapidly calculating possibilities. Something loud. Marcus calibrated a small, sophisticated electromagnetic device. I can overload the junction box for the lighting grid in the east corridor. It will create a flash and a bang. It should draw both of them. You will have one shot. Be prepared. He aimed the device through the grill. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. A brilliant blue-white flash illuminated the far end of the vast basement, followed an instant later by a percussive crack and the distinct sound of shattering glass. The two armed men spun around instantaneously, their weapons raised, shouting to each other as the corridor was abruptly plunged into profound darkness. Alarms began to blare their piercing wail, echoing through the cavernous space. Go now! Marcus yelled, kicking the grill open with a single powerful stomp. They scrambled out a chaotic tumble of limbs onto the cold, unforgiving concrete. For a terrifying moment, Elijah was frozen by the sheer exposure of the open space, his instincts screaming at him to find cover. Then Serafina, with surprising strength, grabbed his arm, pulling him forcefully forward. Elijah moved. They ran their footsteps echoing with unnerving loudness in the cavernous, almost empty space. The 20 yards to the north wall felt like an endless mile. Elijah's lungs burned with the effort, a searing pain in his chest. He could distinctly hear the armed men shouting behind them, their voices drawing closer. He slammed into the wall, his hand slapping against the cool steel, frantically searching for the dumbwaiter door. He found the recessed handle and pulled. Locked. A piercing beam of light from one of the men's weapon-mounted flashlights sliced through the oppressive darkness, sweeping rapidly across the floor directly toward them. Marcus was there in a second, jamming a pry bar into the seam of the door. With a screech of protesting metal, the door abruptly popped open. He shoved Elijah and Serafina inside the cramped, greasy-smelling box. "Get going," he ordered, his voice urgent, squeezing in behind them and pulling the heavy door shut, just as the searching flashlight beam hit the wall where they had been moments before. Plunged into absolute suffocating darkness, Elijah fumbled frantically for the control panel and slammed the up button with the heel of his hand. With a violent lurch, the dumbwaiter began its slow, grinding ascent, the chain mechanism screaming out their location with an almost theatrical loudness. "The medical wing is on the 3rd floor. Elijah whispered, his voice strained. "We're almost there." The dumbwaiter shuddered to an abrupt halt. Through the thin metal door, they could distinctly hear the squeak of rubber wheels on a polished floor and a low, urgent murmur of voices. Marcus slowly, meticulously pulled the door open a fraction of an inch. Through the narrow crack, Elijah perceived a brightly lit, sterile white hallway. Moving silently down it, away from their hidden position, was a gurney, being pushed by 2 orderlies dressed in surgical scrubs. A still-covered figure lay upon it, completely obscured by a pristine white sheet. Dr. Silas Thorne walked briskly beside it, glancing impatiently at his wristwatch. Serafina saw it too. A choked, strangled sound escaped her lips, raw with disbelief and burgeoning horror. A single horrified word that was simultaneously a question and a desperate, fervent prayer. Caleb's Serafina lunged for the door handle, a raw, guttural cry beginning to build in her throat. Marcus, reacting instantly, caught her, his hand clamping down on her shoulder like an unyielding vice, physically pulling her back into the concealing shadows of the dumbwaiter. "No, ma'am, wait!" He hissed, his voice sharp as a blade in the darkness, imbued with desperate urgency. "We are exposed. They will without hesitation kill us all." "That's my brother," she choked out, fighting desperately against his unyielding grip, her eyes locked with a terrifying intensity on the gurney as it neared the freight elevator at the very end of the long hall. Elijah watched his own heart pounding furiously in his throat as Dr. Thorne pressed the call button. The massive steel doors slid open with a heavy, ominous sigh. The 2 orderlies pushed the gurney inside. Dr. Thorne glanced one last time down the empty corridor, a thin, satisfied, almost triumphant smile gracing his lips before stepping in after it. The door slid shut with a heavy, echoing thud of finality. It was over. They were irrevocably too late. A strangled sob escaped Serafina's lips. She slumped heavily against the cold metal wall of the dumbwaiter. The fight, the desperate hope draining entirely out of her, leaving her utterly bereft. All of this, the immense risk, the gnawing fear, the desperate agonizing crawl through the filth, for absolutely nothing. No, Elijah articulated the word quiet, yet resonating with an undeniable firmness. Serafina and Marcus both turned to him, their expressions a mixture of confusion and renewed fragile hope. In the dim light filtering through the narrow crack in the door, they could discern his eyes were narrowed, his brow deeply furrowed in intense thought. "What precisely do you mean, no?" Marcus demanded, his voice edged with impatience. "It's a decoy," Elijah stated, the scattered pieces of the puzzle clicking together with startling clarity in his brilliant mind. "It has to be. He was spooked, profoundly unsettled after your call. He would anticipate that you might attempt something. Why then would he move his most valuable asset through the main heavily monitored hallway? Why the sheet obscuring the identity? Why not a secured body bag if it's genuinely supposed to be mere waste? He's creating a ghost signal, a false trail on the security logs for anyone who comes looking later." Serafina looked up, a flicker of desperate renewed hope igniting, flaring brilliantly in her eyes. She clung to the logic, to the tantalizing possibility. "He desires for it to appear as though my brother departed through that elevator, but he's not actually in there. He's still here, somewhere else." Galvanized by the exhilarating new possibility, she swiftly pulled out her tablet, its screen bathing the small, cramped space in a bright, ethereal glow. She pulled up the intricate third-floor schematic. He would require a place that is secure, isolated, and entirely off the main camera grid, somewhere with a different clandestine way out. Her finger meticulously traced over the neat boxes representing various labs and patient rooms. Elijah leaned closer, his keen eyes scanning the blueprint. Not a new room, an old one, somewhere forgotten. His finger, with an almost uncanny precision, landed on a large grayed-out section at the far end of the wing, labeled in small, archaic text, Surgical Theater 3. "Decommissioned." There, he murmured, his voice firm with conviction. "It's an old wing. They wouldn't have bothered upgrading the security systems. It probably possesses its own service elevator, an ancient one, that goes directly to a basement loading dock, entirely disconnected from the main building network." Serafina zoomed in. He was unequivocally correct. A thin, almost imperceptible line on the schematic indicated a small, isolated elevator shaft, indeed disconnected from the main building network. A ghost exit, she whispered, a dawning realization. Just then, the freight elevator at the end of the long hall chimed its doors, opening once again. Thorne and the two orderlies stepped out conspicuously without the gurney. They headed back down the hallway, their faces betraying no emotion, their clandestine job evidently completed. Now Marcus stated, his voice low and guttural. "Now we move." They slipped silently out of the dumbwaiter into the sterile white corridor. The air hummed with the quiet thrum of unseen machinery and smelled faintly of antiseptic. Every single sound, however minute, was magnified in the oppressive quiet. They moved like wraith-like shadows, pressing themselves tightly into a dark, recessed alcove as Thorne and his team passed the other end of the hall, their backs to them. Elijah watched the doctor's calm, purposeful stride, and an icy chill permeated his very being. This was unequivocally a man utterly devoid of conscience. They reached the dimly lit corridor leading to the decommissioned wing. It was notably darker here, the overhead lights spaced farther apart, casting long, distorted shadows. At the very end of it was a set of heavy double doors constructed of solid steel, with a small wired glass window, revealing only profound darkness beyond. Next to it was an electronic keypad, its single malevolent red light glowing like a baleful, unblinking eye. Marcus meticulously examined the lock. Magnetic seal. Encrypted keypad. I cannot bypass this without either a plasma cutter or a significantly greater amount of time than we currently possess. They were once again irrevocably stuck. A mere few feet of unyielding steel and a formidable password separated them from Caleb. Serafina pressed her ear to the cold metal of the door. She could faintly discern a rhythmic beeping from inside. A heart monitor. He was unequivocally in there. He was alive. Elijah's keen eyes rapidly scanned the wall surrounding the door, his gaze catching on a small, dusty metal plate situated near the floor. The lettering was faded with age, but he could just barely make it out. Emergency atmospheric purge control. He had observed similar panels in archaic industrial buildings. It was undeniably a relic from a bygone era. I cannot open the door. He stated a new, daring idea, slowly but surely forming in his mind. But I believe I can compel them to open it for us. He pointed to the panel. This is a manual override for the room's ventilation system common in old surgical theaters. If there were, say, a chemical spill or a gas leak, you could trigger a purge. It would rapidly suck all the air out of the room and vent it outside, simultaneously replacing it with a sterile saline nitrogen mix. The individuals inside would have approximately 30 seconds to egress before succumbing to suffocation. Marcus stared at him, a look of horrified yet profound admiration slowly spreading across his face. Seraphina's expression, however, turned to absolute ice, a chilling mask of grim resolve. Thorn is a monster, she articulated, her voice a low, vicious growl thick with suppressed rage. Let us observe precisely how he relishes the experience when his own laboratory attempts to murder him. The ancient screws groaned in vehement protest, their threads stubbornly rusted and stiff with disuse. Elijah's fingers, slick with nervous perspiration, fumbled relentlessly with the multi-tool, each turn of the screw feeling agonizingly slow, amplified by the steady, fragile beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor emanating from the other side of the formidable door. It was unmistakably the sound of a precious life hanging precariously in the balance, a life they were about to gamble in a desperate, unequivocally reckless play. The very last screw finally came free. Elijah pulled the dusty panel off, revealing a simple, brutally effective mechanism inside a heavy, insulated red lever set firmly in the off position. Below it, a faded decal read ominously, "Caution activation will result in total atmospheric expulsion." This was it, the irrevocable point of no return. Elijah looked up at Seraphina. Her face was pale in the dim corridor light, but her eyes were burning with a cold, unyielding fire. She gave a singular, sharp nod. Elijah gripped the lever with both hands, his muscles straining with effort, and pulled it down. There was a heavy, deeply satisfying clunk as the lever locked into the on position. For a terrifying suspended second, nothing discernible occurred. Then a deep, powerful hum began to vibrate throughout the very floor beneath their feet, a resonant sound of immense turbines spinning to life somewhere deep within the bowels of the building. A single strobing red light above the steel door began to flash frantically, painting the corridor in silent, rhythmic bursts of crimson. From inside the room, the previously placid beeping of the heart monitor instantly escalated into a frantic, high-pitched shriek. A muffled shout of alarm and profound disbelief followed, then the distinct sound of crashing equipment. The keypad on the wall next to the door lit up, beeping furiously as someone inside frantically attempted to override the purge. Code after code was rejected with merciless efficiency. With a sudden sharp hiss of escaping air, the magnetic lock on the door abruptly disengaged. The heavy steel door was flung open violently from within, and Dr. Silas Thorne stumbled out into the hallway, clawing desperately at his collar, his face a grotesque mask of purple-tinged panic. Directly behind him was another man, older, with thinning gray hair and the terrified, darting eyes of a cornered rat trapped in a rapidly flooding sewer. Dr. Gideon Crow. They gasped convulsively for the hallway air, their lungs burning with the desperate effort. Then, with a chilling clarity, they perceived precisely who was patiently waiting for them. Thorne's panic instantly morphed into an incandescent, furious rage. He spat at Seraphina, his voice a ragged gasp of disbelief and hatred. Before he could take another step, Marcus moved forward, a silent shadow detaching itself from the wall. The sound of his suppressed pistol being drawn was a soft, deadly slick. On your knees, Marcus commanded, his voice a low, flat line of unyielding authority. Hands on your head, now. Crow crumpled instantly, whimpering softly as he dropped to the cold floor. Thorne hesitated, his eyes blazing with undiluted hatred, but the cold, unwavering barrel of the gun aimed directly at his chest made the decision for him. He slowly, shakily knelt beside his quivering partner. Seraphina did not even deign to glance at them. She pushed past her entire world, narrowing to the inviting aperture of the open doorway. She stepped into the decommissioned surgical theater. The room was a sterile nightmare of gleaming stainless steel and dark reflective glass, the air thin and vibrating with the incessant thrum of the purge system. In the very center of the room, upon an operating bed, lay her beloved brother. Caleb was terrifyingly still, his skin the color of aged parchment, unnaturally pallid. A complex web of translucent tubes and delicate wires connected him to a formidable bank of monitors that shrieked with incessant alarms. Serafina rushed to his side, her hand hovering just above his, afraid to touch him, afraid to somehow break him. "Caleb," she whispered, her voice cracking with raw emotion. "I'm here." Behind her in the hallway, Thorne began to laugh, a high, unhinged, almost hysterical sound. "You're too late," he shrieked, his voice echoing eerily in the confined space. "You possess absolutely no idea what you have just so dramatically interrupted. That final protocol was exquisitely delicate. You've murdered him." Serafina utterly ignored the deranged ranting. She stared intently at the machines, at the clear IV bags dripping fluids into her brother's veins. The heart monitor's alarm was deafening, a relentless, piercing shriek. He was crashing. The purge, the sudden profound shock to his fragile system, it was all too much. Elijah stepped into the room behind her. He was not a doctor. He did not comprehend the complex machinery, but he was crucially a janitor. He understood systems. He saw order in chaos. And more importantly, he perceived what was conspicuously out of place. His keen eyes rapidly scanned the array of 4 IV lines. Most were standard clear bags with neatly printed pharmaceutical labels. But one was markedly different. It was a smaller, unlabeled bag containing a dark amber-colored fluid. Its tube was a different, thinner gauge from the others, connected not to the main IV stand, but tucked away, almost completely hidden beneath the gurney itself. It looked like an afterthought, a dark, insidious secret. That one, Elijah said, his voice cutting through the pervasive noise with startling clarity. He pointed his finger steady. "Miss Vance, that bag. It does not belong." Serafina's eyes swiftly followed his pointing finger. She saw it. Without a second's hesitation, she reached down and with a surge of desperate strength ripped the needle from the port in her brother's arm, tearing the tube free. The amber liquid dripped onto the pristine white linoleum floor like viscous, malevolent poison. For a moment, the frantic shrieking of the heart monitor continued unabated. Then miraculously, the rhythm began to slow. The sharp, panicked peaks and valleys on the screen began to soften, gradually settling into a steadier, albeit weaker, yet distinctly regular beat. Beep, beep, beep. Serafina stared, her hand pressed tightly to her mouth as silent tears streamed down her face. Elijah had, with a single crucial observation, just saved her brother's life. The shared, fleeting moment of profound relief was abruptly shattered by a new ominous sound. The heavy thud of boots running rapidly down the main corridor. Shouts. The armed cleaners from the basement, alerted by the blaring alarms, were unequivocally coming for them. Marcus glanced from his 2 subdued prisoners to the open doorway, then back to Serafina, his face a grim, resolute mask. "They're here," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion, "and they are most certainly not going to knock." The heavy steel door shuddered violently as something substantial slammed into it from the outside. Then again, a coordinated rhythmic boom that echoed the frantic beating of Elijah's own heart. "Barricade it," Marcus commanded, shoving Thorne and Crow roughly toward the far wall. Now, while Marcus zip-tied the prisoner's hands with brutal, efficient speed, Elijah and Serafina threw their combined weight against a heavy-wheeled bank of defunct medical monitors struggling to roll it in front of the door. The ancient casters screamed in protest, a high-pitched grating sound. The door buckled again, a small ominous dent appearing in the unyielding steel. "It will not hold for long. They'll breach it in 2 minutes, perhaps even less," Marcus stated, his voice grim yet resolute. He meticulously checked his weapon, the slide clicking home with deadly precision. "We require another way out." The service elevator, Serafina said, her eyes already rapidly scanning the room, recalling the precise location of the ghost exit from the blueprints. There, Elijah pointed to the back of the theater behind the main observation gallery. A formidable wall of obsolete stainless steel autoclaves and sterilizing units stood like silent metallic sentinels. "It has to be back there." Another thunderous crash against the door sent a spiderweb of cracks through the small, wired glass window. They could hear muffled shouts, urgent orders being given in the hallway beyond. "Serafina, retrieve your brother," Marcus ordered. "Elijah, with me, we clear a path." The subsequent 90 seconds dissolved into a frantic, desperate blur of frenzied action. Serafina disconnected the essential monitors, her hands surprisingly steady as she meticulously transferred Caleb's IV drip and the portable heart monitor to the gurney itself. Her brother remained profoundly unconscious, blissfully oblivious to the swirling chaos erupting around him. Elijah and Marcus shoved the heavy autoclaves aside, their muscles straining with the immense effort, the screech of metal on linoleum grating harshly in the enclosed space. Behind the very last unit, they found it, a narrow, unmarked metal door flush with the wall. There was no keypad, only a simple heavy-duty latch and a small, grimy panel next to it labeled Maintenance Override. They are utilizing a battering ram. Marcus grunted, glancing back at the main door, which was now visibly bowing inward under the relentless assault. 15 seconds. Serafina wheeled the gurney over its wheels, catching stubbornly on the uneven floor. Elijah, the elevator. Can you make it operational? Elijah quickly pried the override panel open. Inside was a chaotic mess of old, thick wires and a large, rusted manual lever. It was unmistakably a power disconnect. "It's completely offline," he said, his heart sinking with a sudden profound despair. Boom! A hinge on the main door snapped with a percussive crack, the door slumping inward ominously. "No time for a rewire," Marcus yelled. He aimed his pistol at the lock on the service elevator and fired twice. The shots were deafeningly loud in the enclosed room, echoing violently. The lock shattered, fragments of metal scattering. He kicked the door open, revealing a dark, greasy elevator shaft. The car was fortuitously right there, level with their floor. "Manual crank," he stated, pointing to a large spoked wheel on the wall inside the shaft. "It's our only remaining shot." Just as he spoke, the main door burst open with a scream of tortured metal. Two men in black tactical gear stormed in, their weapons sweeping the room, seeking targets. Marcus opened fire, a controlled, precise 3-round burst that dropped the first man instantly. The second dove for cover, returning fire, the air filling with a deafening roar of automatic weapons and the sharp, acrid smell of cordite. "Get him into the elevator," Marcus roared over the cacophony of gunfire, laying down, suppressing fire with relentless precision. "Go now." Elijah and Serafina pushed the gurney into the small, dark elevator car. It barely fit a tight squeeze. Vance and Thorne, the two bewildered prisoners, huddled miserably in the back corner, whimpering in terror. "Marcus, come on." Serafina screamed, her hand outstretched, desperate. More armed men were pouring into the room, their numbers growing exponentially. Marcus was backed into a corner, exchanging fire, a single man holding back an entire advancing army. A bullet sparked viciously off the metal wall near his head. He glanced back at the elevator, his face grim, a silent, poignant apology in his eyes. "There's no time," he shouted, his voice hoarse with exertion. "Get him out of here, ma'am. That's an unequivocal order." "No," Serafina cried, her voice raw with grief and defiance. "I am not abandoning you." Another volley of bullets ripped mercilessly through the room, chewing up the wall precisely where they stood moments ago. Elijah saw the look on Marcus's face. It was not a choice. It was a profound sacrifice. For Caleb. For Serafina. Acting on pure desperate instinct, Elijah slammed his hand against the elevator's control panel. He found a large, greasy button under a cracked plastic cover that starkly read Emergency Descent. He mashed it with the heel of his hand, a desperate prayer. A loud, piercing alarm bell began to clang incessantly, and with a sickening lurch, the elevator car abruptly dropped. The heavy grill-like doors began to slide shut inexorably. Serafina screamed Marcus's name, her hand still reaching for him in a futile gesture. The last thing they saw before the doors closed was Marcus standing his ground, his gun blazing with defiant fury, as the armed cleaners advanced relentlessly on him, their menacing forms silhouetted starkly by the flashing red emergency light. Then the doors slammed shut with a final metallic clang, plunging them into a rattling, clanging darkness. The sound of the gunfight was abruptly, sickeningly cut off, replaced by the terrifying, gut-wrenching sound of their freefall, descent into the very heart of the sprawling building. The elevator did not merely descend, it plummeted. The emergency brake was irrevocably shot, and the car dropped down the shaft in a terrifying, semi-controlled freefall. The clang and screech of metal on metal was deafening, an unbearable cacophony. Sparks rained down from the severed cables above, illuminating the small, cramped space in strobing, hellish flashes. Seraphina was violently thrown against the wall, her acute grief for Marcus momentarily eclipsed by raw, primal terror. Elijah frantically grabbed onto a maintenance railing, his other arm instinctively thrown out protectively in front of Caleb's gurney, shielding him from harm. Thorn and Crow were a heap on the floor, screaming in unadulterated terror. The fall lasted only a few agonizing seconds, but it felt like an eternity. It ended with a bone-jarring, tooth-rattling crash as the car impacted violently against the bottom of the shaft. The impact was so violent it threw them all forcefully to the floor, rendering them momentarily disoriented. The world went utterly dark. For a moment, there was only the sound of pained groans and ragged, desperate breathing. Then Elijah's voice, surprisingly steady, cut through the oppressive blackness. "Everyone okay? I'm fine." Seraphina managed, her voice shaky, still trembling with the lingering fear. She fumbled frantically for the tactical flashlight Marcus had foresightfully given her. A powerful white beam of light cut through the pervasive darkness, starkly revealing the chaotic scene. The gurney had tipped precariously, but Caleb was still securely strapped in. His monitors were dark, lifeless. Seraphina scrambled to his side, her hands urgently searching for a pulse in the dim, flickering light. "The power's out," Elijah stated, his mind already rapidly working, assessing the situation. He swiftly found the monitor's battery backup switch and with a decisive movement flipped it. The screen flickered to life, its soft glow illuminating Caleb's still face. The steady, reassuring beep, beep, beep of Caleb's heart filled the oppressive silence. He was miraculously stable. Seraphina let out a shuddering breath of profound relief. She looked at Elijah, her eyes full of a dawning, terrifying respect. He wasn't just a janitor, he was unequivocally a survivor. The elevator doors were crumpled and irrevocably jammed, but Elijah, with his intimate knowledge of such mechanisms, found a manual release lever. With a grunt of immense effort, he forced them open a few feet, creating an aperture just wide enough to squeeze through. They were in a cavernous subterranean loading dock. The air was cool and smelled distinctly of diesel and damp concrete. A single bare bulb hanging precariously cast long, dancing shadows. This, Elijah realized, was his world. "There," he said, pointing to a large, rolling steel door. "That's the main exit, but it will be thoroughly locked down. We need another way." His eyes rapidly scanned the loading bay, past the parked delivery trucks and the towering stacks of crates. "Plan B?" He articulated, his gaze finally landing on one of the large trucks. As they began to carefully maneuver the gurney out of the wrecked elevator car, Thorn staggered weakly to his feet. "Wait," he pleaded, his voice a desperate sycophantic whine. He directed his words exclusively to Elijah, utterly ignoring Seraphina. "You do not, Mr. Thorn, have to engage in this. You are not unequivocally like her. I can compensate you handsomely. I can pay you millions, and your daughter, the cure. It was not a complete fabrication. The data was merely accelerated. I can rectify it. I can unequivocally save her. Just permit me to depart. Permit me to walk out that door, and I will personally oversee her treatment." Elijah stopped. He turned slowly to face the man who had been mere seconds away from brutally murdering his savior's brother. He thought of Aisha, of her sweet, trusting face, and he thought with a chilling clarity of the amber-colored poison he had witnessed dripping into Caleb's veins. "You do not possess the right to utter her name." Elijah stated, his voice low and cold as the concrete floor beneath his feet, imbued with an unshakable resolve. "You do not possess the right to speak about saving anyone. You are a monstrous individual, and you are destined for a prison cell for the remainder of your miserable life." He turned his back on Thorn, the conversation for him definitively concluded. Seraphina watched the entire exchange, her expression utterly unreadable. She had, in their brief alliance, offered Elijah a sacred promise. Thorn had, in his desperation, offered him a tempting bribe. And the janitor, who possessed every conceivable reason in the world to be selfish, had unequivocally chosen justice. Elijah, with a single forceful blow, smashed the smaller passenger side window of the nearest truck with a fire extinguisher. He reached in, unlocked the door, and slid into the driver's seat. A few seconds later, the powerful engine roared to life, shaking the very ground. "Get him in the back," he yelled over the thunderous noise. Seraphina and a terrified Dr. Crow loaded the gurney into the truck's vast cargo bay. Seraphina climbed in beside her brother, her gaze fixed on him. Elijah slammed the truck into gear and stomped on the accelerator. The heavy vehicle lurched violently forward, smashing through the rolling steel door with a deafening crash of tearing metal and splintering debris. Alarms blared to life across the compound as they burst out into the pre-dawn chill, leaving chaos in their wake. A mile down the dark, empty road, he pulled the heavy truck over to the shoulder. Serafina emerged from the passenger side, her face streaked with grime and exhaustion. She took out her satellite phone and meticulously dialed a number from memory. "Director Ramsey, this is Serafina Vance," she articulated, her voice ringing with absolute unyielding authority. "I am unilaterally declaring a clear and present threat at the Orion Research Facility. I possess direct, irrefutable evidence of illegal human experimentation, conspiracy to commit murder, and massive financial fraud. The men responsible are armed and extremely dangerous. I require a federal tactical team on site immediately, full quarantine and containment protocol. My authority, Director, stands." She ended the call with a decisive click. Soon, they heard it. A distant rhythmic chopping sound growing steadily louder, more insistent. On the horizon, a swarm of black, unmarked helicopters descended upon the facility like avenging angels, their powerful rotors beating a relentless rhythm against the pre-dawn sky. The cavalry had unequivocally arrived. Serafina climbed back into the passenger seat, her body slumping with the sheer weight of exhaustion, her gaze fixed on the flashing lights in the distance, a beacon of justice. The immediate life-threatening peril was over, but the profound cost was only just beginning to settle in. She turned to Elijah, her voice quiet and heavy, with a grief that was just beginning to surface, raw and palpable. "He didn't survive, did he?" she asked, her voice cracking barely a whisper. Marcus Elijah stared at the road ahead, at the path leading them away from the chaos and back toward a world that would never again look the same. He possessed no answer to offer her. There was only the profound, aching silence. The world outside the truck was a disorienting blur of flashing lights and screaming sirens, a symphony of aftermath. Elijah drove his knuckles white against the steering wheel, his mind a numb, empty void still processing the raw events. Serafina sat in profound silence, her gaze fixed steadfastly on the road ahead, yet seeing only the indelible image of Marcus, framed by the inexorably closing elevator doors. A lone soldier defiantly standing against an unstoppable tide. They encountered the first federal blockade approximately a mile down the road. Within minutes, their chaotic, desperate escape transformed seamlessly into a controlled clinical operation. Medics swarmed the truck, carefully transferring a stable, but still profoundly unconscious Caleb to a waiting life flight helicopter, its blades already whirring. FBI agents took a sputtering, protesting Dr. Silas Thorne and a catatonic Dr. Gideon Crow into custody, their faces masks of defeat. A brisk professional agent attempted to question Serafina, but she cut him off with a sharp, decisive gesture. "I will provide my full statement in precisely 1 hour," she stated, her voice like unyielding steel, resonating with absolute authority. "My paramount priority right now is my brother." She looked at Elijah, her gaze conveying a silent command. "And him. He remains with me." The initial days that followed were a blur of antiseptic hospital corridors, hushed, guarded debriefing rooms, and the constant quiet hum of medical machinery. The swift raid on the Orion facility had been brutally efficient, flawlessly executed. Thorne's entire insidious operation was systematically dismantled. His sprawling network of corrupt researchers and ruthless hired guns were apprehended in a single decisive stroke. The full monstrous truth of his pervasive fraud was laid bare for the entire world to behold, a shocking revelation. Serafina sat in a private waiting room, her gaze fixed intently on the sprawling city beyond the window, when Director Ramsey of the FBI entered the room, his expression grave. "He's a true hero, Miss Vance," he stated without preamble, his voice filled with a quiet reverence. "My men breached the surgical theater and found him surrounded by 4 unconscious assailants. He was completely out of ammunition, but he was remarkably still standing. He is currently in critical condition, but the medical doctors assert he is unequivocally going to recover." Serafina closed her eyes, a single solitary tear tracing a path through the grime that still streaked her cheek. Marcus. He had, against all odds, survived. That profoundly welcome news became the very foundation of their new, unfolding reality. While Caleb began the long, arduous journey of recovery, his body systematically purged of Thorne's insidious poisons, Serafina waged a different kind of war. She unequivocally fulfilled her solemn promise to Elijah. She took the genuine, untainted data gleaned from Thorne's research and, with a powerful sense of purpose, established the Vance Thorne Foundation, a multi-billion-dollar initiative committed to discovering a legitimate ethical cure, bringing together the world's most brilliant and distinguished neurologists. Their very first two patients were Caleb Vance and Aisha Thorne. 6 months later, the first real vibrant breath of spring was spilling abundantly through the delicate branches of a colossal oak tree, dappling the emerald lawn in shifting ethereal patterns of gold. From the wide, inviting porch of a comfortable, quiet house, nestled securely in a tranquil neighborhood, far from the ceaseless noise of the city, Elijah watched his daughter chase a bright soccer ball across the lush grass. Aisha ran. She did not stumble. Her laughter was bright, effortless, and joyous. And when she kicked the ball, her movements were sure, confident, and steady, devoid of any previous tremor. Her hands, the very hands that used to tremble so visibly when she held a crayon, were now strong enough to confidently catch a ball thrown a little too hard by her new best friend. Caleb Vance, leaning casually against the porch rail, laughed heartily as the ball bounced harmlessly off his chest. He still walked with a cane, a faint yet persistent reminder of the terrifying storm he had so bravely weathered. But his eyes were clear, lucid, and brimming with newfound life. "Hey, watch it, superstar," he teased Aisha playfully. "You're going to send me back to the hospital, nah?" She giggled, running swiftly to retrieve the errant ball. "You're far too strong for that." Elijah smiled, a deep, genuine smile that finally reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. The experimental gene therapy meticulously developed by the Foundation had unequivocally worked. It had not merely halted the insidious progression of the disease, it had miraculously begun to reverse it. Serafina stepped out onto the porch carrying 2 tall glasses of refreshing lemonade. She handed one to Elijah, their fingers brushing lightly a familiar, comfortable gesture. The vast chasm that had once separated their 2 disparate worlds had now irrevocably closed, replaced by a bridge meticulously constructed of shared trauma, mutual respect, and a profound, unspoken understanding. "Look at them," Serafina said softly, her gaze fixed tenderly on her brother and Elijah's daughter. The ice that had once encased her very being had demonstrably melted, leaving behind a strength that was warmer, more profoundly human. "Just a few short months ago, I was foolishly buying into a profound lie because I was too profoundly afraid to confront the unvarnished truth. And you, Elijah, you were willing to irrevocably burn your entire life down just to shine a searing light on it." Elijah watched Aisha score a triumphant goal between 2 lawn chairs, her arms raised high in victory. "I was not attempting to be a hero," he said, his voice quiet, tinged with humility. "I was merely attempting to be a father." "That's precisely what heroes are," Elijah Serafina replied, her voice soft yet firm. "Just people relentlessly attempting to protect the ones they profoundly love." At the edge of the verdant lawn, a man with a slight, almost imperceptible limp of his own watched the children play, a quiet, satisfied smile gracing his features. Marcus, now honorably retired, had unequivocally refused to be anywhere else. Aisha came running exuberantly up to the porch, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright and sparkling with joy. She held up a piece of paper, a new drawing, its colors vibrant. It was not a grim castle with a formidable gate designed to keep monsters out. It was a simple, heartfelt picture of a house with a magnificent, sprawling oak tree. Beneath the tree, 5 stick figures held hands, a man with a cane, a little girl with a bright yellow shirt, a quiet man who watched from a distance, and in the very middle, a man and a woman standing closely together. Above them all, a giant radiant sun shone down its warm rays, touching each and every one of them. Elijah took the drawing, his throat tight with emotion. He looked at Serafina, and in her eyes he perceived the same profound reflection of their impossible journey. They had commenced their perilous adventure in a world of gleaming glass towers and humble custodial closets, a stark dichotomy of power and invisibility. But by traversing through the fire together, they had remarkably found their way here, to this tranquil porch, on this glorious sunny afternoon. They had finally found their way home. The story of Serafina, Elijah, and Caleb is more than just a tale of danger and secrets. It is a reminder of how far love, courage, and compassion can carry us. It shows us that even in the darkest corridors, a father's devotion and a sister's unshakable will can light the way forward. In the end, what truly heals and protects us is not power or wealth, but the quiet strength of protecting those we hold dear. And you, if it were your loved one behind those locked doors, how far would you go to bring them back? What would courage look like in your own life? If this story touched you, we invite you to share your reflections in the comments below. Your words may give strength to someone who needs it. Don't forget to subscribe so you can continue walking with us through stories of resilience, love, and hope. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing that even the most fragile light can break through the heaviest darkness.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.